The wine hit his coat at precisely the wrong moment, and the perfectly right one. He had been enduring the Harrington ball for 47 minutes, he had counted. Because counting was the method he applied to situations he could not exit immediately and needed to survive. And in those 47 minutes, he had been cornered by 3 mothers with eligible daughters, 2 political associates with marriage proposals, dressed as alliances, and 1 woman he had been actively avoiding for the better part of 11 months. The ballroom was the particular kind of suffocating that only a Mayfair ballroom in the season could achieve. 200 people in a space designed for 150, all of them performing something. The candles were too many and too bright. The orchestra was working hard against the noise of the room and losing. The smell of hothouse flowers and powder and ambition was the specific smell of the season, and the season was, as it always was, exhausting in the precise way that things are exhausting when they require you to be something you are not, in front of a large audience for extended periods. He was the Duke of Ashford, 33, unmarried, and possessed of 3 estates, a seat in the Lords, and the most eligible title in 3 counties. These facts made every social event a negotiation he had not consented to enter. He had inherited the title at 28, which meant 5 years of this particular variety of social pressure, and he had managed it with the contained authority that his political allies read as composure and his secretary read as controlled fury, and which was, in truth, something in between. The 3rd mother had just finished presenting her daughter 19, sweet-natured, and deeply unsuitable in the specific way that someone unsuitable can be perfectly pleasant, when Lord Pemberton materialized at his elbow, with the specific expression of a man about to introduce a political arrangement as a social pleasantry. He was weighing his available exits when the wine arrived. A full glass of claret, down the left lapel of his evening coat. In the same moment, that a woman emerged from the crowd to his immediate left and said, very quietly and very directly, into the space beside his ear, "If you want them to leave you alone, look at me like you're in love." He looked at her. She was not anyone he recognized from his social world. She was dark-haired and dark-eyed, and had the specific expression of a woman who has just done something reckless and is in the process of deciding to lean into it rather than retreat, which was, he noted, a quality he found immediately interesting. She was also holding what was now an empty glass, and looking at him with the steady directness of someone making a proposal with full awareness of its terms. He looked at her, not the polite social acknowledgement of a man being introduced at a ball, not the studied appraisal of a man assessing an eligible woman. He looked at her the way she had told him to, the full gray attention of a man encountering someone for the first time, and understanding that this is someone worth the full attention. The room noticed. He felt it happen, the specific shift in the social atmosphere of a ballroom when something unexpected occurs at its center. 200 people's attention, distributed across 100 simultaneous conversations, recalibrating toward the Duke of Ashford and the woman he was looking at, as though everyone else in the room had temporarily ceased to exist. The 3 mothers withdrew. Lord Pemberton retreated with polished grace. The woman he had been avoiding disappeared into the crowd with a speed that suggested she had been looking for an exit as urgently as he had. The room rearranged itself around the new information. The Duke was occupied. "You've ruined my coat," he said quietly. "You're welcome," she said. "You were approximately 30 seconds from being engaged to someone you clearly couldn't bear. I could see it from the refreshment table. You were watching me. I was watching the room," she said. "You were simply the most interesting thing in it, largely because you looked as though you wanted to be anywhere else, which is not the common expression at these events. And now? Now they think you're already taken?" she said, with the slightly breathless quality of someone realizing the full scope of what they have initiated. "And you have approximately 4 minutes before someone with sharper eyes decides we need to be introduced properly, which will either advance or complicate the situation, depending on who it is. What would you like to do with those 4 minutes?" He looked at her. "Stay," he said, "and tell me your name." She looked at him with the assessment of someone calculating a risk. Whatever she calculated, she arrived at a decision quickly. "Nora Vane," she said. "The Duke of Ashford. I know who you are," she said. That was rather the point. What followed was 40 minutes that neither of them had planned. He took her into supper. They were seated together at the end of the longest table, which was the position that provided the most visibility and the least effective eavesdropping, which she identified within 2 minutes, and which he appreciated. They talked, not the social talk of a ballroom introduction, but the actual variety that occurs when two people discover they are the same kind of person, the kind that pays attention to things. He learned she was the daughter of a clergyman who had died 3 years ago. She had a younger brother named Tom, who was 21 and had the specific talent for financial difficulty that young men of no resources and some charm reliably developed. She lived in Bloomsbury. She had been at the Harrington ball because a school friend, Lady Pemberton, who moved in the circles Nora no longer moved in, had insisted, and because the specific kind of difficulty that Tom's debts had created made the season's social opportunities feel worth the discomfort. She did not tell him about the previous work. He noticed the gap and filed it. He told her almost nothing personal, which she observed without comment. He spoke about the season's particular tedium, about a bill moving through Parliament that was more important than anyone in the room appeared to understand, about a book he had been reading on agricultural management that she immediately identified and had thoughts about. She had thoughts about everything he was discovering. Specific, direct, unperformed thoughts. At some point during the second remove, she said, without looking at him, simply watching the room, "Lady Harcastle is watching us. Third table, left. She has been watching for 20 minutes, and she has the expression of someone taking inventory." "She does that," he said. "Does she report what she takes inventory of?" He paused. He looked at his glass. "Possibly," he said. "Then we should give her something specific to report," Nora said. "Something that reads as genuine attachment rather than a convenient social arrangement." "In my experience," she stopped. "In your experience?" he prompted. "People read genuine attachment in detail," she said. "Not grand gestures. Detail. The way he hands her things. The way she tilts toward him without noticing. The specific quality of not needing to perform it." He turned to look at her. "And how do we achieve that?" he said. "We achieve it by being interested in each other," she said. "Which, as it happens, is not requiring a great deal of effort on my part this evening." She said it simply, and without coquetry, as though it were simply another piece of intelligence about the situation. He found it, for reasons he did not immediately analyze, considerably more destabilizing than the wine. By the end of the evening, London believed the ruthless Duke of Ashford was engaged. The woman he appeared to be engaged to arrived home by hackney carriage, sat in her one good chair in her Bloomsbury rooms, looked at the specific evidence of her brother's debts, stacked on the corner of her desk, and thought, "I wonder if he will come." She thought, "He will come." She was right. Before we continue, kindly support this channel, subscribe and like the story to reach others. Thank you. I want you to understand something about that ballroom. In 1816 London, the marriage season was not a romance. It was a market with centuries of institutional practice behind it. Every titled man of marriageable age was a commodity. Every woman in that ballroom was navigating the only economic system available to her. Nora Vane walked into that market, spilled wine on the most eligible title in 3 counties, and invented the evening that followed. The question the story is asking is not whether the arrangement was real. It was always real. The question is whether the two people in it would be honest enough to say so. Stay with me. In Regency England, the season roughly April through July was the primary social event of the year and the institution through which the marriage market operated. A duke who remained unmarried was subject to structural pressure from every direction. His tenants needed a legitimate heir, his political allies needed the social stability of a settled household, and his family's continuation was his obligation. A duke's household without a duchess was, by the standards of the period, an incomplete institution. The women who applied this pressure were not being unreasonable by the social logic of their world. They were operating the only system available to them, as was, in a different way, Nora Vane. He found her 3 days later. This was not difficult. He was the Duke of Ashford, and he had resources. She had given him her name. The address followed within 4 hours. What surprised him was not where she lived, but how she lived. The Bloomsbury lodgings told a story he could read clearly enough. The good furniture that was slightly too large for the room, as though it had been moved from a better-sized house. The curtains that were clean, but faded. The small economies of a person managing on reduced means, with the specific dignity of someone who has been managing reduced means long enough to have learned how to do it without letting it show, except to careful observers. He was a careful observer. She received him in the small sitting room that had her brother's drawings on the writing table, architectural sketches, he noted, done with some skill, and offered him tea with the particular composure of a woman who is not going to apologize for the quality of the china, and is also not going to pretend the situation is different from what it is. He sat in the chair across from her and said, without preamble, 14 months. I beg your pardon? My secretary tells me I need to manage the season effectively for 14 more months before certain political arrangements become available that will give me significantly more flexibility about the marriage question. I need London to believe I am engaged and therefore unavailable during that time. She was quiet for a moment, that he recognized as the pause of someone assembling the full shape of what they had just heard. You want a fake fiancé, she said. I want someone credible, intelligent, and capable of managing the social obligations that come with the position, he said. Someone who can read a room, hold a conversation with anyone from a political minister to a country baroness, and maintain the performance consistently across 14 months of social scrutiny. The Harrington Ball was, among other things, an audition. You arranged for me to be there, she said. No, he said. You were there genuinely. I was there genuinely. What you did with the wine was your own work, and I found it sufficiently interesting. And if I had not done it, then I would have spent 47 more minutes enduring Lord Pemberton, he said, and you would have spent the rest of the evening feeling the specific social discomfort of being a woman who used to belong to this world and no longer quite does. We were both looking for an exit. You found the better one. She looked at him. He had the impression that she was assembling him the way she had been assembling the social geography of the ballroom systematically, without hurry, without performing the assessment. After 14 months, she said, the engagement ends. By mutual agreement, you take the public responsibility. Yes. And my brother's debts. Cleared, he said. Entirely. I know the amounts, and I know the creditors. The arrangement will be structured so that the clearance happens in stages, a portion at the beginning, the remainder at the end, so that you have both an immediate relief and an incentive that is not entirely based on trust. You've thought about the incentive structure, she said. I manage large estates and complicated people, he said. Incentive structures are how things function. And in the meantime, I live in Ashford House. In a suite on the 2nd floor. Your own rooms, your own maid if you prefer to bring one. Appropriate chaperonage arrangements that satisfy the social world. Publicly, my fiancé. Privately, the terms we agree on paper. On paper, she said. I want a written contract. Every condition, every contingency, every limit. Of course. Not of course, she said, with a directness that he found immediately refreshing. You have resources, and I do not. In an arrangement where one party has everything to lose and the other has significantly less at stake, the documentation is not optional. It is the thing that makes it survivable if it goes wrong. He looked at her for a long moment. You have been in a position where something went wrong and was not documented, he said. That is a very careful inference, she said. It is correct? It is, she said, not something I will discuss as a condition of accepting your proposal. If I accept. When you accept, he said. Not arrogance, the assessment of a man who knew what he was offering and had correctly calculated that she needed it. She looked at the drawings on the table. She looked at him. I want 3 things, she said. The written contract with every detail. The first portion of Tom's debts cleared before I moved to Ashford House. and the freedom to tell you if something in the arrangement is not working without the cost of the entire arrangement collapsing. All three are reasonable, he said. I accept them. Then I accept, she said. When do we begin? He looked at her with the full attention. We already have, he said. In Regency England, a betrothal was one of the most socially consequential announcements available. Once announced, it created a set of social obligations that were difficult to manage without both parties performing their roles with consistency. The social world was very good at detecting performances that were inconsistent, the warmth that appeared in public and disappeared in unobserved moments. Genuine attachment, by contrast, was visible in the details no one had thought to perform, the way a man adjusted to make room for a woman's movement without being asked, the way she handed him things he needed before he reached for them, the way two people's physical awareness of each other was mutual and constant without being deliberate. A fake betrothal required, paradoxically, more genuine attention to detail than a real one. They were good at it. This was the first surprise, and the one that, in retrospect, should not have been a surprise at all. She moved into Ashford House on a Monday morning, with 2 trunks and the specific composure of a woman who had been managing difficult situations since she was 19, and had learned that the best posture for a new difficult situation was forward-facing and observant. She walked through the house with the Duke's housekeeper, Mrs. Ashby, and asked exactly the questions that told him everything. Not which rooms were hers, but which rooms the staff used, how the household ran, who had authority over what. She was mapping the institution she had joined. By Wednesday, she knew the name and role of every member of the household staff. By Friday, she had identified 3 inefficiencies in the household accounts that she mentioned to Mrs. Ashby in the specific tone of someone making a practical observation rather than a criticism, and which were resolved within the week. He watched this and thought, she is not performing the engagement. She is managing the household. These were not the same thing, but they were both real. The social appearances began the following week. The first was a dinner at Lord Pemberton's 16 Covers, a mix of political and social guests, the kind of event that required her to be simultaneously warmly attached to him, intellectually credible to his political associates, and socially comfortable with women she had not met before. She managed all 3 with the ease of someone who had rehearsed extensively, except that she had not rehearsed. She had simply paid attention. He noticed, specifically, the moment Lord Alderton's assistant, a young man named Crabbe, who worked closely with the Port Development Committee, was introduced to her. She smiled with full warmth and said something that made him laugh, and then she turned away. And in the half-second between his laugh and her turn, he saw the expression she was actually having, which was the expression of someone who has just placed a face in a context they were not expecting. He noted this. He did not mention it until the carriage. The carriage was where everything happened. 40 minutes between the events and Ashford House, the privacy of the enclosed space, the lamplight through the windows. He had expected the strategy sessions to be briefings. He found himself extending them. Crabbe, she said, settling against the carriage seat. The young man from Alderton's office. How long has he been working with the committee? 8 months, he said. Why? Because he recognized me, she said. Not as your fiancé. He recognized me from before. He managed it. He is skilled. He covered it, but for approximately 2 seconds. When Lady Pemberton introduced us, he was looking at me with the expression of someone who knows something they did not expect to be known tonight. The carriage was quiet. From where would he know you? He said carefully. From the document house where I worked before Bloomsbury, she said. I told you there were things I would not discuss, as a condition of accepting. This is not a condition conversation. This is a relevant intelligence exchange. He looked at her in the lamplight. Tell me, he said. She told him. Not all of it. Some was still too close, and she was a woman who had learned to give information in measured amounts. But enough. She had worked for a document house, an informal establishment that handled sensitive legal and commercial correspondence. The kind of place that operated at the edge of the legitimate, and was therefore extremely well informed, about what the legitimate world did not want documented. She had been there for 18 months, before the man who ran it had been arrested for something she had not been part of, but had been too close to. And she had left with the clothes she was wearing and Tom's debt, and the specific knowledge of how certain powerful people preferred not to have their business recorded. Alderton's office used the document house, he said. Frequently, she said. For correspondence, they preferred not to appear in official channels. And Crabbe? I processed his letters, she said. I would remember him. He would remember me. The carriage moved through the London night. He was thinking with the specific focus that difficult information required. Are you at risk? He said. I don't know, she said. What I know is that if Crabbe reports my presence in your household to Alderton, it will not be received as a coincidence. No, he said. It will not. What is the arrangement between Alderton and your ports exactly? He had told her about the ports in general terms. He told her the specific terms now, because she had just given him information that suggested she needed them, and because he was discovering a man who found it easier to trust her than he had expected to find it. She listened with the complete attention that was simply how she engaged with important things. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. The Port Development Committee has been trying to redirect authority over 2 specific harbors, she said. Away from your control, toward a structure they manage. Yes. And they need either your cooperation or your compromise to do it. Yes. And a woman who worked at the document house, where their average private correspondence was processed, she said, is a liability they would find uncomfortable. A significant one. Then we should assume, she said, that Crabbe will report to Alderton before the week is out. And we should decide what we are going to do about that before he does. He looked at her. What do you suggest? I suggest we continue the engagement exactly as planned, she said. And I begin quietly reconstructing what I know from the document house, in case we need it. Information properly documented is considerably more useful than information held in memory. He was quiet for a moment. You're going to build a case, he said. I am going to organize what I already have, she said. Which is quite a lot, as it turns out. The carriage arrived at Ashford House. She was out of it with the contained efficiency that was her characteristic movement. And he watched her go, and thought. He had hired someone to perform an engagement. He had instead acquired, apparently, an intelligence operation. He was not displeased. In Regency England, the emotional management expected of a man of rank was a significant and rarely discussed aspect of ducal life. A duke was expected to be authoritative, decisive, and controlled emotions were vulnerabilities in the political world he inhabited. The specific isolation of this position surrounded by people whose primary interest was transactional, where every relationship carried an agenda, meant that genuine connection was both rare and, when it arrived, profoundly destabilizing. The man who discovered, somewhere in the middle of a contractual arrangement, that he had formed a genuine attachment was not equipped by his education, his social training, or the conventions of his world to manage this gracefully. He was simply going to have to navigate it with the tools he had, which were intelligence, stubbornness, and the specific kind of honesty that had always been more natural to him than pretense. He began noticing her in small, specific ways, which was how he knew he was in difficulty. He noticed the way she lied when she was afraid. Not large lies, she was too skilled for those, but the specific small adjustments of a woman who had learned to manage fear by managing its expression. Her speech accelerated very slightly, by perhaps 10%. Her hands became extremely still, as though if the hands were controlled, the rest of the performance would hold. He had seen it twice. Once when a man at Lord Pemberton's dinner had spoken about Bloomsbury with the casual contempt of someone who has never been unable to make rent, and once when Lady Evelyn Hartfield had said, in the specific tone of a woman who knows exactly where to place a knife, that she hoped Miss Vane was finding the social obligations of Ashford House manageable. He had excused them from Lady Evelyn's company within 30 seconds on both occasions. He had not explained why. She had not asked. This exchange of information without words was one of the things he had started to notice about the two of them. He noticed the way she smiled when she was planning trouble. It was almost identical to her social smile to anyone who wasn't watching carefully, but his attention had become very careful. The planning trouble smile arrived at the corners first, and had a quality of something suppressed, the full expression being deliberately managed, rather than the partial expression being the full one. He had seen it at 3 separate social events, when she had identified something worth knowing and was deciding how to acquire it. And at least twice in the house when she had arrived at a conclusion before he had, and was choosing when to present it. He noticed that she softened around children at social events, the ones brought for display, and then left, unattended at the edges of rooms while the adults performed. She found them without appearing to look. She crouched beside them for a few minutes and listened to whatever they were concerned about with the focused attention she gave to everything, as though the 5-year-old's problem with his boots was exactly as worthy of her full consideration as Lord Pemberton's political strategy. He noticed that he had begun arranging to be in the same room as her, when his schedule did not require it. He noticed this last thing on a Tuesday in mid-July, when he had come to her private sitting room on the pretext of reviewing the week's social calendar and had found her reading a volume on agricultural reform, which she had taken from his library and which she had opinions about, that took 40 minutes to express fully, and he had walked back to his study afterward with the specific quality of a man who has done something he cannot pretend. Was unintentional. He applied his management disciplines. He was a man who had governed his interior world by governing it internally, and he was good at this. The discipline held through 2 social events and a dinner at which she identified a connection between Alderton's associate, Harcastle's shipping interests, and a specific harbor regulation that she presented to him afterward. With the contained satisfaction of someone who has been working on a problem and has just closed it, the discipline held until the evening. She handed him the relevant page from the committee report she had obtained. He did not ask how, and her hand brushed his when he took it, and neither of them moved for a fraction of a second longer than the exchange required. The discipline had a shelf life. He could see it. Lady Evelyn Hartfield was the problem he had been expecting since the beginning, in the shape he had not quite anticipated. He had known there would be social opposition. What he had not calculated accurately was the organizational quality of it. Evelyn was the daughter of a marquess, 26, handsome, and possessed of the kind of political intelligence that the social world mistook for social accomplishment because she wrapped it in the right dress. She had expected with reasonable grounds, based on conversations that had occurred before the Harrington ball, that the Duke of Ashford's eventual marriage would serve the specific political alliance her family represented. The Harrington ball had upended that expectation overnight. What he had not immediately understood was that Evelyn's opposition was not only personal. The questions she was asking about Nora, the gentle social inquiries into her family background, her financial history, her previous associations were too specific and too well-informed to be the work of a woman nursing a personal grievance. Someone was feeding her questions. Someone who knew the shape of what to ask. Nora identified it on the evening of the Beaumont musicale, when Evelyn spent 30 minutes in careful conversation with a man she afterward described to him without being asked. The man she spoke with at the musicale gray coat, 3rd group near the east window. He works for Alderton's committee, not a principal, an information gatherer. How do you know he works for the committee? He processed 2 categories of correspondence through the document house. She said, committee business and private accounts. The committee business is what concerns us. What was the nature of the committee business? Instruction letters, she said, to people whose job was to find information about specific individuals that the committee wished to manage. He looked at her. She looked at him. They are building a profile of me, she said. Yes, he said. They've had one since before I was introduced to you, she said. The document house, the arrest of the man who ran it, the connection to Crabbe, they already knew I was a liability. Having me appear in your household was either very bad luck or something they needed to investigate urgently. I think, he said carefully, that we have underestimated the scope of what they have been building. Tell me, she said. He told her the full picture. Not the managed version he had been giving her, the complete one. The port diversion scheme, the political players, the specific mechanism by which Alderton's committee intended to compromise his position. The 12-year history of administrative interference with his household accounts that he had recently begun to suspect. She listened to all of it, without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet, for exactly the length of time it took to absorb it. "You have a traitor inside your household," she said. "I believe so." "Someone with long access," she said. "Not staff. Not recent. Someone with 12 years of knowledge of your household's architecture." "Yes." "Have you narrowed it?" "I have suspicions I cannot yet prove," he said. "Then let me help you prove them," she said. "I know how information moves through institutional arrangements. I know what the evidence of a long-term information operation looks like. I have been building the case on the committee side for 3 weeks. Let me build it on the household side as well." He looked at her. The lamplight of the private sitting room, the social world's noise a floor below, entirely unaware. "You've been building a case for 3 weeks," he said. "I told you I was organizing what I already had," she said. "I did not specify how thorough the organization would be." "Nora." "Yes. Is there any aspect of my household's security that you have not independently investigated?" She considered this with the slight expression of the planning trouble smile. "I haven't looked at the wine cellar accounts," she said, "but I expect they are clean." He stared at her. Then he laughed the real laugh, unmanaged. The first one in this house in a considerable time. She looked at him with the expression she had when something had surprised her, in a way she found entirely good. "The wine cellar accounts are clean," he confirmed, when the laugh had settled. "I shall take them off the list," she said. In Regency England, control of major ports was one of the most politically significant assets available. The period immediately following the Napoleonic Wars saw intense competition for economic control of Britain's coastal trade infrastructure. A duke who controlled port access had leverage over the movement of goods, the taxation of trade, and the economic well-being of entire communities. Political operators who wished to redirect this control needed to compromise the duke's position through debt, scandal, legal challenge, or the manipulation of his social alliances. The man who had no obvious weakness was a man who required one manufactured, which is what the Port Committee had been doing, through Compton, for 12 years. The sitting room was entered on a Wednesday night. Not her bedroom. Her working room, the room where she kept her correspondence, her case notes, the specific organized materials of 3 weeks of careful assembly. The room had been entered by someone who knew precisely what they were looking for and precisely how long they had. Nothing was taken. This was the point. Someone with the skill to enter the room could have taken what they needed. Instead, they had left the room in a state of almost imperceptible disruption. Almost, but not quite, if you knew the room as well as she did. A correspondence stack shifted by 2 inches. A drawer closed at a slightly different angle. The particular arrangement of papers that she had developed as a habit of mind, quietly disarranged. They had not come to steal. They had come to read. And they had left the evidence of having been there, deliberately, so she would know. She stood in the room for 20 minutes, cataloging every disruption, cross-referencing it with what had been there and what they would therefore now know. Then she went to find him. It was midnight. He was in his study. When he saw her expression, he put down his pen. "What has happened?" he said. "Not a question," she told him. She told him with the complete account and the complete catalog of what had been there and what they had likely read and what the implications were of their having read it. He listened with the focused stillness of a man whose threat assessment had just recalibrated significantly. "They know about the case," he said. "They know I have been building one," she said. "They don't know how complete it is, because the most significant documentation I've been keeping in a location they did not find." "Where?" "In the library," she said, "inside the agricultural reform volume I borrowed last month." It seemed unlikely that anyone looking for political intelligence would search through an agricultural text with a woman's annotation style. He stared at her. "It was there when I was reading it," he said. "Yes," she said. "You read around it. You commented on the section about field drainage." which does not appear in the margin where I put the first document. He was quiet for a moment. You used my library book as a document safe, he said. It was the safest available. Location, she said. No one searches a man's personal reading for political documents. Except me, he said, inadvertently. You read around it, she said. You were interested in the field drainage. He stood. He came to stand across the desk from her. How safe are you? He said. I don't. Nora, he said. Not as an intelligence assessment. How safe are you, right now, in this house? She looked at him. The honest eyes. I don't know, she said. He moved immediately. He spoke to his two most trusted household men. He arranged for them to be outside her rooms every night. He arranged for a specific guard rotation that Compton, whom he was now watching with the focused attention he applied to problems he was certain about, would not be able to map or circumvent. He came back to the study, where she was waiting. The protection is in place, he said. I could manage. Not negotiable, he said. The contract did not include this risk. I should have anticipated it more carefully. The protection is a correction of my own failure of planning, not a comment on your capabilities. She looked at him. She accepted. Then she said, The traitor is Compton. Yes, he said. I believe so. When did you know? I have suspected for 2 weeks, he said. I have been managing the suspicion carefully so he doesn't know he is suspected. He is the one who read my room, she said. Not personally, he would have directed someone. But the access, the knowledge of which room, the specific disruption that was professional rather than rushed, that is the profile of someone with institutional knowledge. Yes, he said. Then he needs to believe the case is more limited. Then it is, she said. Which means we need to stage what he sees next. Give him a version that is incomplete in a specific way. Something that makes the committee believe they have contained the threat. He looked at her. While we complete the real case, he said. While we complete the real case, she confirmed. We have, at present, enough for approximately 70% of what the Home Secretary would need. I need 3 more pieces. 1 from the committee correspondence, 1 from Compton's private accounts, and 1 from the port records themselves. How do you intend to obtain them? The port records are accessible through a clerk I know from the Document House days, who owes me a significant debt of the non-financial variety, she said. The Compton private accounts I have already begun extracting from the estate paperwork by a method I would rather not explain in detail. The committee correspondence is the difficult one. Tell me the difficult one. I need to be inside Alderton's house, she said, his private correspondence room. Which means I need an invitation to a social event at which I can be unobserved for approximately 12 minutes. He looked at her for a long time. Alderton is hosting a political dinner in 3 weeks, he said. I know, she said. I need to be invited. I can arrange the invitation, he said. I cannot arrange to have you be unobserved for 12 minutes in the man's private correspondence room. You can create a distraction of sufficient quality, she said. That is considerably easier. He stared at her. You want me to create a 12-minute political distraction in a room full of the men who are trying to ruin me? He said. You are excellent at managing powerful men in confined spaces, she said. I have been observing this for 6 weeks. Use what you are good at. Let me use what I am good at. He looked at her with the full gray attention. When this is finished, he said, I want to know everything about the Document House. Everything. When this is finished, she said, I will tell you everything about it. It is a considerably more interesting story than most of my social conversations this season. The trace of the planning trouble smile. He recognized it. He found it, against all expectation, entirely wonderful. In Regency England, the distinction between performed and genuine affection in a public couple was considered by the social world essentially undetectable. What it looked for was consistency, the warmth that appeared in public and in unobserved moments alike. Genuine attachment was visible in the details that no one had thought to perform the adjustments made before being asked. the anticipations that could not be scripted, the physical awareness of each other's position in a room that was mutual and constant, without being deliberate. Two people faking an engagement with sufficient attention to detail would eventually confront the specific problem that the detail had made them real. The Alderton dinner was on a Thursday. He had arranged the invitation through a political associate who owed him a favor and would not ask why. Nora had spent 3 days reviewing what she knew of Alderton's house layout from the document house correspondence that had mentioned it, and had assembled a specific route. The private correspondence room was on the first floor, east wing, accessible from the corridor behind the main staircase. The event was a dinner of 20, with drinks in the main drawing room beforehand 40 minutes, in which 20 people would be moving through connected rooms, providing the natural coverage that a woman moving purposefully through a house could use. She wore the dark silk. She had 3 gowns adequate to this season's social events, and she had selected the one that was most invisible, not plain, not underdressed, but the specific color and cut that moved through a candlelit room without creating a visual impression. He noticed the dress immediately. He noticed that it was the one she had thought most carefully about. He noticed that she had made herself invisible for the event, which was the correct tactical choice, and found this, the specific intelligence of the decision, more striking than any elaborate dress would have been. He created the distraction she needed. If you are enjoying the story so far, kindly support this channel. Subscribe and like the story to reach others. Thank you. He created it by engaging Lord Alderton and his 2 principal political allies in a conversation about harbor taxation that was simultaneously provocative enough to hold all 3 and technical enough to prevent anyone from joining it. Briefly, and then drifting away. He was extremely good at this. He managed it with the focused control of a man deploying his best professional skill in service of something he had decided mattered. She was gone for 11 minutes. When she reappeared in the drawing room, she was holding a glass of champagne and talking to a woman about the difficulty of finding adequate millinery in the summer months, and her expression was the same pleasant social surface that it had been all evening. And he knew, from the specific quality of her hands being very slightly more still than usual, that she had found what she was looking for and was managing the adjacent feeling of relief with the technique she had developed for managing the adjacent feeling of fear. In the carriage he said nothing. She said nothing. Then, on a particular empty stretch of road, she reached into the bodice of the dark silk dress and produced 3 folded pages, which she handed to him with the expression of someone handing over something they have carried carefully and are glad to no longer be carrying. He took them. He read them in the carriage lamplight. He read them for a long time. "This is the committee's communication about the forged documents," he said, "before they existed. This is instructions for the forgery. Yes. Nora. Yes. This is the entire case. The 3 pages together with the port records and the Compton accounts are the complete case," she said. "Yes. I told you it would be 3 pieces. I found all 3 tonight." He looked at her. "The Compton accounts were in Alderton's house?" "Alderton has been holding Compton's private account records as security," she said. "In case Compton needed to be managed. It is a common practice in these arrangements. The person who controls the records controls the person. You knew they would be there." "I suspected," she said. "The document house taught me the pattern." He was very still. He looked at the 3 pages and thought about the 11 minutes she had spent alone in Alderton's correspondence room, and what could have happened in those 11 minutes if someone had noticed, and what he would have done if it had. "You could have been caught," he said. "I was careful. You reached into a political enemy's private correspondence room at a dinner of 20 people. I was careful," she said again, with the slight impatience of someone who has been called careful by people who mean insufficient. "I was not careless. I was calculated. There is a difference." "I know there is," he said. "And I know that you are right about everything you just did." "I am." He stopped. "You are?" she said. "Aware," he said carefully, "that the feeling I am currently managing with some difficulty is not professional concern. It is something considerably less manageable, and I am telling you that because I have decided not to pretend otherwise, which is a change from my previous approach to this specific problem. She looked at him in the carriage lamplight. How long have you been managing it? She said. 3 weeks, he said. Approximately. The Tuesday with the agricultural reform book is when the management became noticeably less effective. I see, she said. You are going to say something useful, he said. I can tell by your expression. I am going to say, she said, with the planning trouble smile visible despite what appeared to be genuine effort to contain it, that I have had the same problem for approximately the same length of time, and that I have been managing it with the techniques available to a woman who has been hurt before and has developed a significant investment in not being hurt again, and that the techniques have also become less effective. He looked at her. She looked at him. The carriage moved through the London night. Then we both stopped pretending, he said. That seems reasonable, she said. Good, he said. He took her hand. He held it with the careful quality of someone who is being very precise about what they are doing. And she let him hold it. And they arrived at Ashford House with the documents that would bring down the committee and the arrangement between them that was no longer the arrangement they had signed in writing in June. In Regency, England, treason working against the Crown or State was a capital offense. The specific form the port conspiracy represented redirecting control of strategically significant coastal infrastructure to foreign or seditious parties, operated through legitimate-seeming administrative channels, which made it harder to prosecute, but no less dangerous. The man or woman who could expose it required both specific evidence and the credibility to present that evidence before it could be buried or the witnesses discredited. This was why Nora's knowledge was dangerous, not because she understood every detail of what it meant, but because the people who needed it suppressed understood that she could understand, and that she was now in a position to act. The forged documents arrived on a Friday morning. They came through the post, indistinguishable in their external presentation from legitimate correspondence, and they purported to be letters from him to a party in France, dated carefully to a period before the engagement, recent enough to be actionable, suggesting that the port development was intended to benefit a foreign operation that the law would not regard favorably. He recognized the forgery within 4 minutes of reading the first page. The dates were wrong. The voice was wrong. Too formal in the places he was informal. Too casual in the places he was formal. The specific rhythm of a person who had read his correspondence, but had not spent enough time in his company to replicate the texture of his thinking. He brought them to her immediately. She had them on the library table within 10 minutes of seeing them and was examining them with the focused attention that she applied to all documents. The paper is wrong, she said, without looking up. Look at the watermark. This manufacturer, she tilted the page toward the light, came into operation in January of this year. These letters are dated September of last year. The paper didn't exist. You can read watermarks. Anyone who worked in a document house can read watermarks, she said. It's the first thing you learn. Paper is the most reliable part of a document because people remember to forge the handwriting and forget to match the stock. Can you prove it in a legal context? Yes, she said. I know the paper merchant. I can get a signed statement about the manufacture date within 3 days. Combined with the documents from Alderton's house, the port records, and the Compton accounts, this forgery becomes the final piece. It establishes that the committee created false evidence against you, which is the element that turns the case from a political dispute into a criminal one. How long to complete the legal assembly? 3 days, she said. 4, if I want it to be unassailable. 4, he said. Make it unassailable. She worked for 4 days. He observed this with the attention he applied to things that mattered, which meant he observed it very carefully. She was at the library table from 7 in the morning until 10 or 11 at night. She ate the meals that were brought to her without fully stopping, reading while she ate the way he did when something was urgent. She thought out loud, sometimes fragments of connection spoken into the room, which he sometimes had answers to, and sometimes simply heard and registered as evidence that the thinking was working. On the fourth afternoon, he brought her tea and sat across the table from her, rather than at the far end, which was a change he made without commenting on it. She noticed. She noticed everything, but she did not comment either. She simply moved a stack of documents to make room for his cup and continued working. This was, he thought, the most domestic moment they had had. More domestic than any social appearance, any carriage ride, any evening in the sitting room. Two people at a table, with separate work and shared purpose. The specific intimacy of that. "It's finished," she said, at 10:30 on the fourth evening. He looked up from his own papers. "Every connection documented," she said. "The forgery proven. The paper stock evidence attached. The committee's communication about commissioning the forgery. The Compton account records, showing 12 years of payments. The port records, showing the diversion mechanism. And the Alderton correspondence establishing that the scheme was designed to force you into political compromise or criminal exposure. It is complete. It is unassailable. You can take this to the Home Secretary, and it will not be deniable." He looked at what she had built. "You built this in 4 days," he said. "I built it over 8 weeks," she said. The 4 days were the final assembly. He stood. He came around the table and stood beside her and looked at the assembled case. 34 pages of documented evidence, organized with the precision of someone who had spent 18 months in a document house and had never forgotten what clear documentation looked like. "Nora," he said. "Yes, I want to say something." "You can say it," she said. "I have finished working. I want to say—" He stopped, the word "careful man" finding himself insufficient. "I want to say that what you have done here is extraordinary. Not the document assembly, though that is extraordinary. What is extraordinary is that you came into a contractual arrangement with a man who had resources you needed, and who could not guarantee your safety from the first week, and who gave you insufficient information, and who watched you build. This." He touched the edge of the document stack, while managing everything else. "And you did not retreat when the room was entered, and you did not retreat when the danger became clear. And I have been aware, for some time, that what I hired for was not what I received, and what I received is—" He stopped. "Considerably more than you expected?" she said, with the planning trouble smile in full expression. "Considerably more than I knew to look for," he said. "Which is not the same thing." She looked at him. He looked at her. The library at 10:30, the case complete on the table. "We should be careful," she said. "I have been careful for 11 weeks, he said. "I am not interested in more careful." She stood. He took her face in his hands. The second time, except this time, there was no document waiting, no problem to return to, nothing waiting at all but the fact of two people who had arrived somewhere together. She was not careful. Neither was he. The case was taken to the Home Secretary the following morning. She was gone on the morning of the 4th of September. He had told her the previous evening in the library, after a dinner they had attended together and returned from early, because neither of them wanted to be anywhere else, that the 14 months no longer mattered. He had not used those exact words. He had used words that were more precise and took longer to say, but communicated the same thing, which was that the contract had become inadequate as a description of what was between them. She had listened with the full attention and then said, in the specific, direct way that was entirely hers, "I understand what you are saying. I want to be certain you understand that I am not going to perform uncertainty about whether I want it. I want it. I have wanted it since the Tuesday, with the agricultural reform book. I am simply careful about things that have cost me before." "I know," he had said. "Be patient," she had said. "I am patient," he had said. "With everything except the risk to your safety, which I am no longer patient with." She had almost smiled. He had gone to sleep in his own rooms and thought about the morning and the engagement announcement and the specific quality of things that were about to become real. He came down at 7 o'clock. She was not at the breakfast table. He assumed she was sleeping. At 7:30, her maid came down white-faced and said Miss Vane had not been in her bedroom when she brought the morning tea. At 7:45, he went to her sitting room. The door had been forced, not broken, the work of a professional lockpick who had not needed more than 30 seconds. Her maid was unconscious in the corridor outside, drugged rather than harmed, which told him two things. They were professionals who did not want unnecessary complications, and they needed whatever leverage she represented to be intact. He stood in the doorway of the empty sitting room for 45 seconds. This was not shock. He was a man who had managed crises before. The 45 seconds was the specific focus of every resource he had, brought to bear on a single point. Find her. He found Compton within 40 minutes. He did not find him gently. He found him with two men, and the specific, focused authority of a duke who knows exactly what he knows and has decided that the time for careful management is concluded. Compton, faced with this, lasted 9 minutes before he said everything. It was, in the end, the calculation of a man who had served two masters for 12 years and had decided, in the specific clarity of the Duke of Ashford's full attention at close range, that one of those masters was no longer worth the cost. The ship was the Constance, third berth east at the Wapping docks. It carried legitimate cargo and had a legitimate manifest, and was scheduled to depart at first light the following morning. Its cargo hold currently contained a woman who had been taken because she was the most significant threat to the committee's position, and the most effective way to neutralize her was to remove her from the country before the evidence she had assembled could be presented. He left for Wapping at midnight with two men he trusted beyond doubt. The Thames Docklands, particularly Wapping, were one of the most dangerous and commercially vital areas of London in 1816. The docks operated around the clock, ships loaded and unloaded at all hours. The geography of multiple berths and passageways made them nearly impossible to police effectively. A cargo ship departing before dawn with a prisoner below decks was not unusual enough to attract significant attention. What the committee had underestimated was that the Duke of Ashford knew precisely which ship, which berth, and which passageway, because Compton, once talking, did not stop. The Docklands at midnight were the specific world of men who worked without observation. The dock workers, the cargo loaders, the men who preferred the hours when the city's oversight slept. He moved through them with the focused silence of someone who had a destination and a time constraint, and no room for hesitation, his two men a step behind him, all three of them moving in the specific way that said, "We know where we are going, and we are not stopping." The Constance was exactly where Compton had said. Third berth east, a mid-sized cargo vessel, lights on the deck, two men at the gangplank who were there for a reason that had nothing to do with legitimate cargo. He assessed them from 30 yards and made decisions accordingly. He went aboard without announcement. There were 4 men in the below-deck area. They made the calculation that many men make when the numbers appear to favor them. 4 against 3. They had the advantage. This calculation did not account for the specific quality of the 3 it was 3 against, and it was resolved in approximately 4 minutes. The hold was at the stern, behind the legitimate cargo. The padlock on the door opened with the key Compton had described. She was sitting with her back against the hull of the ship, not collapsed, not hysterical, sitting with her back against the cold hull with her knees drawn up and her arms around them, and looking at the door as it opened, with the expression of a woman who had been sitting in the dark for 7 hours and had spent the 7 hours thinking rather than despairing. He crossed the hold. He went down on one knee in front of her, and he took her face in his hands, both hands, the specific care of a man who is touching something he has been afraid of not being able to touch again. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No," she said. "They needed me functional for whatever comes next. They were not violent." "Good," he said. Then, with the specific control of a man managing something that is larger than the word he is choosing, "Good." She looked at him. In the lamplight of the hold, she looked at him with the full expression she had been managing carefully since the Tuesday with the agricultural reform book, which was no longer managed at all, which was simply there, in full, because 7 hours of sitting in the dark had apparently concluded her investment in managing it. "You came," she said. "I came," he said, "with 2 men, for a ship, I did not want to wait for more. You could have, no, he said, with a specificity that settled the sentence. I could not. She looked at him for a long moment. I was thinking about the evidence, she said, while I was waiting. The forged documents, I know there is a second verification route I haven't used. If the committee's printer kept a master record of Nora, he said, yes, you were sitting in the hold of a ship and you were thinking about evidentiary verification. Routes. I was also thinking about other things, she said. The evidentiary route was the safe thing to think about. What were the other things? She looked at him in the lamplight. The Thames was cold against the hull. Somewhere above them, his 2 men were managing what needed managing. Somewhere in the hold, there was only this. I was thinking, she said, that I agreed to 14 months, and I have been dreading the end of them since approximately the 6th week. I was thinking that the arrangement I signed was insufficient to describe what the arrangement had become. I was thinking, she stopped. I was thinking that if you came, I was going to tell you that, and stop being careful about it, and that if you didn't come, I would still tell you. Eventually, in whatever circumstance became available. I came, he said. Yes, she said. I asked you to pretend for me, he said. I gave you a number and a contract, and the architecture of a temporary arrangement. Somewhere in the course of it, I forgot that I was the one who had designed it to be temporary. Somewhere I stopped being able to imagine the ending without it feeling. He paused. He was a careful man with words, and this required care. Without it feeling like a version of silence that I don't think I can go back to. I never wanted the month to end, she said. I told myself I was managing the problem of you with the appropriate professional distance. The professional distance stopped being available around week 6, and I have been managing without it since. Which is harder. Stop managing it, he said. I have been trying to tell you that, she said, for approximately 3 weeks. Tell me now, he said. Clearly, the way you say things clearly. I am in love with you, she said. The direct version. The precise one, not the performed version. The real one, that arrived without permission, and has been extremely inconvenient, and is also entirely non-negotiable. He was very still. I have the same problem, he said. In the same terms. Non-negotiable. She looked at him for one more moment, and then she put her arms around him with the specific fierceness of a woman releasing something she has been holding back for a considerable time. And he held her with the specific care of a man who has spent 24 hours understanding what it would mean to not be able to hold her. And the Thames moved against the hull of the ship, and London went about its business, and neither of them moved for a long time. In Regency England, the exposure of administrative treason required legal and political management through specific channels. A duke had access to parliamentary channels, to the Home Secretary's office, to committee oversight mechanisms that could investigate directly. But this machinery required initiating in the right order, with the right evidence, and by the right person. The timing mattered. The sequence mattered. And the person who assembled the evidence most effectively was, in this case, the woman who had spent 7 hours in a ship's hold, organizing her thinking, and had arrived at the complete picture. She assembled the 5. Final verification in 2 days. The printer's master record, the second route, she had identified in the hold, confirmed the paper stock dating more precisely than the manufacturer's statement alone. She obtained it through the dock worker contact, who had occasionally passed correspondence through the document house, and whom she located with the efficiency of a woman who had spent 18 months maintaining relationships she knew might be useful later. The complete case went to the Home Secretary on a Thursday morning. He presented it. She had written him detailed instructions about the order of presentation, which document to lead with, which to hold back until the specific questions were asked, which elements would require the most verification and therefore should be preempted. He followed the instructions precisely and reported afterward that the Home Secretary's expression had moved over the course of 2 hours, from polite skepticism to undisguised alarm. He said it was the most comprehensively documented case of administrative conspiracy he had received in his tenure. He reported to her in the library that evening. He has been in the position for 4 years, she said. What does that tell us about the standard of documentation in the cases he usually receives? It tells us, he said, that the standard is low and you are not. She accepted this without performance. He had noticed that she received genuine compliments directly, not the deflecting of false modesty, simply the acknowledgement of a thing said accurately. On the evening after the Home Secretary meeting, she came to the library with the expression of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and has decided the time to put it down is now. I want to tell you about the name, she said. The name. From your mother's correspondence. Yes. He sat. She sat across from him, the same configuration they had used for 9 weeks of carriage rides and strategy sessions and case building, the configuration that was the furniture of everything they had built. She told him. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and in clearing her rooms, Nora had found a locked correspondence box that she had opened with the specific, careful attention she gave to things she suspected mattered. Inside, letters spanning 15 years. Letters from a man who signed himself only with initials, but whose references to places and people and events had told her, over several careful readings, that he was a man of rank, who had known her mother in circumstances that were not the circumstances her mother had described to her. The family name she had found in those letters. The connection to the Duke's family. The timing that placed the connection at a period when the Duke's own father had been involved in a political matter that had ended badly, a matter that Nora had found referenced in the Document House correspondence, without knowing, at the time, that she had any connection to it. He was very still throughout. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. My father had a political alliance that failed in 1793, he said. It failed because someone inside the alliance provided information to the opposing party. The man who provided the information was never definitively identified. My father believed until his death that it was someone named Ashby, a minor gentleman, a peripheral member of the alliance, who disappeared from London shortly after the collapse. Ashby, she said. Yes. My mother's name before her marriage was Ashby, she said. The library. The September evening. 2 people sitting across a table with the full shape of a thing between them. It could be coincidence, she said, with the specific tone of a woman who does not believe it is coincidence. It could be, he said, with the same tone. It doesn't change anything, she said. I want to be clear about that. Whatever connection exists, whatever the history is, it doesn't change what is between us. I am clear about that, he said. I know, she said. I wanted to say it anyway, explicitly. What does it change? He said. It changes what we have to investigate next, she said. The man who arranged Tom's first debt. The debt that made your offer necessary. I have never known who he was. Tom could not give me a name, only a description. But if the Ashby connection is real, and if there is a person who knew both my mother's history and your family's history, someone arranged for us to meet, he said. Someone may have arranged for us to meet, she said. And someone who can do that has resources and a long memory, and a specific interest in either the connection or its consequences. Or both, he said. Or both, she agreed. The fire burned in the grate. Outside, London on a September evening was doing the thing it sometimes did when September was right, being briefly, specifically beautiful. Then we find him, he said. Yes, she said. Together. Together, she said. The word that had been accumulating meaning since June. The engagement was announced on the 14th of September in the Morning Post. Not the fake one that had been building in the social world for 3 months. The real one. The formal announcement. The letters to the families. The specific ring on her finger that he had given her in the library 2 evenings before. Sitting beside her at the table, rather than across it. She had looked at the ring for a long moment. It was not the elaborate show of a man demonstrating resources. It was a narrow band of dark gold, with a single setting, the family ring. The one his mother had worn, the one that had been in the Ashford household for 4 generations. He had not brought it out for display. He had simply brought it because it was the right one. "This is the family ring," she said. "Yes." "You thought about which ring to bring." "I always think carefully about the things that matter," he said. She had put it on. She had looked at it on her hand for another moment. Then she had looked at him with the full expression that she had stopped managing since the hold of the Constance, and had said, with the directness that was entirely hers, "You are going to have to be patient with me about this for some time. I know what I want, and I know what this is, and I am still going to be cautious in ways that will require patience." "I know," he said. "You don't find it frustrating?" "I find," he said, with the specific care of a man choosing the exact word, "that I would rather have the real thing at the pace it requires than a performance of it at the pace that is convenient." She had looked at him for a long moment. "You are extraordinarily well suited to me," she said. "It is somewhat alarming." "Yes," he said. "I noticed that around week 4. I found it alarming as well." The social response to the announcement was approximately what they had both expected and somewhat more than either had been prepared for. The enthusiasm was considerable. London was always enthusiastic about the resolution of a mystery it had been invested in for 3 months. The opposition was specific and came from the quarters they had anticipated, most notably from the political associates who had been hoping for a different alliance. Lady Evelyn Hartfield sent a note of congratulations that was precisely judged. Nora read it twice, and then wrote a reply that she showed him before sending. "This is very good," he said, reading it. "It is the correct register," she said. "Warm enough to preclude resentment, specific enough to signal that I understand her position, ambiguous enough to leave the future relationship open." "Where did you learn to write notes like this?" "The document house," she said. "We handled a great deal of delicate correspondence. I learned the registers." He looked at her. "You are going to keep producing skills I didn't know you had," he said. "For quite some time, I expect," she said. He came to her sitting room that evening, not the formal visits of the engagement period. Simply came, because it was the end of the day and there was no other place he wanted to be. She was reading when he arrived, and she looked up and moved the book from the chair beside her, which was an invitation of the kind they had developed, small, unspoken, entirely clear. He sat. The fire. The September London evening outside the window, briefly beautiful. "The committee," she said. "Alderton specifically. What happens to him?" "The investigation is proceeding," he said. "The Home Secretary is thorough. Alderton will not return to political life. 3 members of the committee will face charges. The port authorities have been restructured under direct oversight." "And Compton?" "Dealt with," he said. Quietly. "He will not trouble anyone again." "The ports are secured?" "Properly," he said. "For the first time in 12 years. She nodded. She looked at the fire. She said, "I want to find the man who arranged Tom's debt. I want to understand the Ashby connection. I want to know whether the ballroom was chance or design." "I know," he said. "I think we should begin with the description Tom gave me of the man." She said, "He said he was gray-haired, maybe 60, well-dressed, had the bearing of someone who had been in service in an institution and had never quite left it. And he said the man knew Tom's name before Tom had introduced himself." He went very still. "He knew Tom's name," he said. "Yes, which means he had already found Tom before the debt. Which means he went looking for him. Which means someone sent him," he said. "Yes. And that person knew enough about your family to know Tom existed," he said. "And knew enough about the Ashby connection to know that creating a debt that required a specific resolution would create a situation in which I would be receptive to your offer," she said. "Which means someone wanted us in a room together," he said. "Which means," she said, looking at him with the expression she wore when a conclusion was both complete and alarming, "that everything that has happened since June, the ballroom, the arrangement, the committee, the ship may have been shaped by someone who has known both our histories for a very long time and has been waiting for a specific moment. The fire. The evening. The ring on her finger. Then we find them, he said. Yes, she said. Together. Before they find us, he said. Before, she agreed. She took his hand. He held it. They sat in the fire of the September evening, with the real engagement between them and the old mystery opening like a door into the next room, and neither of them was afraid of what was behind it, because they were going to walk through it in the same direction. If you are enjoying the story so far, kindly support this channel, subscribe and like the story to reach others. Thank you. The ballroom, the wine, the look that said, "Look at me like you're in love." He looked at her. He was. The Duke of Ashford and Nora Vane are fictional. The world that made their situation possible is not. In 1816 London, the marriage season was one of the primary mechanisms through which political, economic, and social power was organized. A duke's marriage was a political statement, an economic arrangement, and a social signal read by everyone in his orbit. The pressure on eligible men of rank to marry was structural and relentless, managed through precisely the mechanisms shown in the ballroom, the coordinated approach of mothers, political operators, and social climbers who understood that the season provided a specific window of access. Nora Vane's skills, document analysis, social observation, evidence assembly, the capacity to read information movement through institutional arrangements were not in 1816 recognized as professional competences for a woman. They were simply how a woman, who had learned to survive in difficult circumstances, survived. The document house where she had worked was the kind of informal establishment that women with education and no resources found their way into. Unacknowledged, uncredentialed, genuinely skilled, and operating at the edge of the world that the legitimate institutions preferred not to look at directly. The Port Conspiracy reflects a real and significant aspect of post-Napoleonic British political life. Control of coastal infrastructure was one of the most fiercely contested economic assets of the period. The corruption of administrative systems to redirect this control was not uncommon, and the specific vulnerability of a man whose attention was divided and whose household might contain parties with conflicting loyalties was precisely the kind of leverage that political operators sought. The cliffhanger, man who knew Tom's name before he was introduced, the Ashby connection, the shaped ballroom night, is not the end of the story. It is the architecture of the next chapter. Every good story is a door into another one. If this story found you at the right moment, share it. Like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications. If you found yourself in the ballroom, the carriage, the hold of the Constance, tell me where you are listening from. I read every single one. Share this with someone who would appreciate a woman who uses an agricultural reform book as a document safe. This story is for them.